or personal style that offends God, but rather the use of one's appearance to act out or take on a sexual identity different from the one biologically assigned by God at birth. In his wisdom, God intentionally made each individual uniquely either male or female. When men or women claim to be able to choose their own sexual identity, they are making a statement that God did not know what he was doing when he created them. I'm going to quote directly from Dr. Tony Evans' commentary Bible on this passage of Scripture. Men and women equally share in bearing the image of God, but he has designed them to be distinct from and complementary toward one another. The gender confusion that exists in our culture today is a clear rejection of God's good design. Whenever a nation's laws no longer reflect the standards of God, that nation is in rebellion against him and will inevitably bear the consequences.
Gentlemen will suspend. The House will be in order. Gentlemen may continue.
I'm going to read that line again. Whenever a nation's laws no longer reflect the standards of God, that nation is in rebellion against him and will inevitably bear the consequences. And I think we are seeing the consequences of rejecting God here in our country today. And this bill speaks directly against what is laid out in Scripture. Our government, through this bill, is going to redefine what a woman is and what a man is. It can be anyone who identifies in that gender.
Mr. Stubbe, what any religious tradition ascribes as God's will is no concern of this Congress.
Yo, what up, what up? I hope everybody is having a wonderful week so far. I got something that I've been wanting to say for quite some time, and this video just pushed me over the edge, and I'm finally going to share with you something that's been on my mind for a while now. So if you paid any attention to the video, you will notice an issue that we have always had, that we are always going to have. That there are people who are for the things of God, who are for the Bible, and people who are not for the things of God and who are opposed to the Bible. If you've been paying any attention to things that are going on in the world, you will know there has been this massive debate around sex, gender, marriage, and family. Who gets to decide how that works? God or us? Now, what you just heard was a congressman who is conservative reading a commentary from Pastor Tony Evans dealing with God's creation of humanity, saying that God made us male and female, and any nation who tries to construct laws that go against that is going against the will of God. And then you heard a Democratic liberal congressman say, and I quote, "It is not the business of this Congress to do God's will." Now, before I say anything else, let me preface my statement by saying this. I do not believe that one party or the other fully captures what it means to be a Bible-believing, God-honoring Christian. I don't. They both have their flaws and they both have their issues. That's obvious. But here's what I will say. We all watched for months and months how people with these big platforms, including Christians and some Christian artists, take anybody who was a Christian conservative period, demonize, critique, and criticize them, drag their name through the mud, and assassinate their character just because they claim to be a conservative, calling them bigots, calling them racist, and any other foolish insult you could think of, demonizing anybody who was leaning to one side in particular. Now, if you want to have a conversation about our government and its flaws and its issues, I'm okay with that. But don't just sit here and beat up one side, acting like the other side doesn't have their problems. But it always seems to be one side. And here was the question I've asked several people who have these type of platforms. You spend all your time talking about conservatives, how they're racist, and the flaws within that side of the system. But when it's time for you to speak up against the other side, all of a sudden you're silent. Why is that? Why are you so comfortable critiquing and criticizing one side, but when it's time for you, especially those of you who are Christian, to speak up against the evil and atrocity that you see on the other side, all of a sudden you ain't got nothing to say? Why is that? Here is my issue. We have to have just scales. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes it doesn't look like we do. It looks like there are a lot of people, especially Christians, cherry picking the things they want to complain about and be angry about. How can we be as outraged as we are about racism, but then not be as equally outraged when the government is trying to take away and override my ability to be a father to my children? The current administration is presenting legislation that would give the government the power to override me as a parent and give my minor child the ability to decide for themselves whether or not they wanted to have gender reassignment surgery. Like, I wouldn't let my kid pick their own diet. You know why? Because all they would eat is gummy bears, Oreo cookies, ice cream, and wash it down with a soda pop. They'd be diabetics by the time they were teenagers, dead by the time they're 30. And you want to give them the ability to pick their gender? Like, you guys have lost your freaking mind. Somebody in Washington forgot to wear a bike helmet as a kid. Like, I don't understand. You guys have thrown logic right out the window. And I'm confused. Why are you confused, Jay? I'm glad you asked. Let me tell you why. Because all of these people, and keep in mind, a lot of them were Bible-believing, Jesus-worshiping Christians, had so much to say. And now you've got people in government who are blatantly, openly, publicly disrespecting and dishonoring God and His word, and all of a sudden, you ain't got nothing to say. Like, what's the deal, son? We had a whole lot to say 6 months ago, 3 months ago, a year ago. Why don't you have anything to say now? I want to know. I've got an opinion. What's yours?